Welcome to a very special presentation here on the Parchive channel. I'm Tom Corliss. The reason we're releasing these videos to you now is this marks the 1-year anniversary of the closure of MuppetVision 3D at Disney's Hollywood Studios. If you're anything like me, it's been an emotional year missing this attraction, one of the greatest of all time and arguably one that never should have been removed. But 1 year ago, we had a tremendous honor to host several individuals from both the Jim Henson company side and the Walt Disney company side who came together to create this indelible attraction. And what we're releasing today is all 4 of those presentations. So you're about to watch one of 4 presentations from that very special event that we called a glorious 3-day finale. And we hope you enjoy that. Now, if you enjoy these presentations, I want to let you know about a very big event and similar event we have coming up that's not focused on a single attraction, but a wide array of Disney attractions and parks all around the world. That event is called Way Back Wed, and it's happening October 2nd and 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort. This will be our largest ever gathering of Disney Imagineers and creatives from over the years. And we're going to talk about all sorts of topics from the Hall of Presidents, the American Adventure, Electrical Water Pageant, Main Street Electrical Parade, so many amazing topics. We have the women of Walt Disney Imagineering. We're going to be signing their book. Bob Weiss, former president of WDI. The list goes on and on and on. You can see all the names, in fact, at waybackwed.com. But tickets are running out fast, especially our VIP package, which is nearly sold out. So this might be the last chance you get to pick up those tickets. But again, October 2nd and 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort in the legendary Ballroom of the Americas. We're going to have this event, and registration is open now. Now, you do have to be a WIGS member to register. So to do that, you have to go to patreon.com/WDWNT. Now, the good news is we've introduced a free tier of the WIGS program, so it doesn't cost you anything extra to register for the event. Now, if you do want a discount on your event registration, you can join at a paid level, and as you rise through the paid levels, the discount does increase, so keep that in mind. So with that said, we hope you enjoy this visit back to a glorious 3-day finale and the closure of MuppetVision 3D, and we hope we'll see you at our next event. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a glorious 3-day finale as we celebrate MuppetVision 3D and Jim Henson and the Muppets' role at Walt Disney World. Originally, we were going to have a welcome, and I just want to get things started. I think it's best to just get things started. You've been waiting a while. Who knew we'd be late? That's never... If it's your first WDWNT event, welcome. This is how it goes. We're kind of the real-life Muppets. What happens on screen in the Muppets is what happens backstage at our workplace. But I have the distinct honor of being up here to start things off this morning with some of our former Imagineer friends. We have Kathy Rogers, Eric Jacobson. Eric Jacobson. And Paul Osterhout. If you've seen or been to some of our previous events, some of you maybe saw Stage 89. We celebrated 35 years of Disney's Hollywood Studios, and that lays the framework in many ways for today. The 3 of you were nice enough to come to that event and speak, and we spoke about MuppetVision, and I infamously ended that panel by saying, MuppetVision will never leave us. Yeah. But here we are today, and so the opening, all of you worked on the opening of the Disney MGM Studios. And so how does that lay the framework for MuppetVision 3D?
Well, I think, as you all know, the Disney MGM Studios was wildly more successful than anybody anticipated. It was originally designed to be a half-day park, and it quickly became a full-day park. And Michael Eisner and the other executives at Disney wanted to expand it as quickly as possible. And so the first thing that we looked at was doing star tours, which Paul was was heading up, and that you've heard all about that. And we were looking at all kinds of things. Let's make a deal, whatever you could put in there to occupy people's time because they want to spend more time.
Huh? You told the Pee-wee's Playhouse story, and I'm still very sad about that.
Yeah.
Very sad I didn't get to see
Yeah,
that.
so Pee-wee's Playhouse was even considered until something
Happened.
unexpected happened. And also Michael Eisner was a huge fan of the Muppets. I remember him personally saying this to me, I always loved the Muppets, and we should do something to the Muppets, and so that was something the deal was being worked on, and so we said, what can we do quickly with the Muppets? And the first thing that we did was a show called, we didn't do it, a Creative Entertainment did a show called Here Come the Muppets, which was live characters as Muppets in one of the theaters of the studio. And in the meantime, we said, we got to do something bigger than that, so let's start brainstorming. And we knew we couldn't do something as quick as entertainment did, so we got together with the Henson people, and Jim in particular, and started brainstorming what could we do that would be great and be a legacy kind of attraction, but wouldn't take 8 years to design and build and a ride system and all that kind of stuff. So we hit on the idea of a 3D movie, and I'm really paraphrasing here. This is much more complicated than that. But we said, 3D movies are still complicated, and they're a big, huge hit with our guests, especially at that time. And we had done Captain EO and Magic Journeys and other things like that. So we said, how can we take that and step it up to the next level? We could talk about that a little bit later, but
Well, who here was scarred by Magic Journeys?
No, right.
That clown still haunts us.
Anyway, so that's really what it was. How can we, marshal the team, get together, go quickly, but do something that we'll all be proud of, and that will last for a long time, and it did last for a long time, and that's how we started out doing it.
Now you're saying that, it was quicker than designing a ride system and building a ride, but you have, it is a 3D show, but at the same time, it's the most complicated 3D show made to that point, and you have so many of the effects and hallmarks of a ride, audio animatronics, and incredible new special effects, which we'll talk about as the day progresses, things like that. So yeah, you're talking about doing something quicker, but still something really.
It wasn't that we said, how can we do something fast and cheap? I don't mean to say that at all. But I said, what is a medium that we can work in that will take probably the shortest amount of time to deliver a quality project that we'll be proud of, that Jim would approve of, and he would love and want to participate in, and all the other Henson people. And that's why we said, a 3D movie would be really cool. And plus it gets a chance to see the characters up close and do different kinds of things. And we had really had success with Captain EO, and we really wanted to stretch that idea of how can 3D movies become even more 4D than they already were. And so that was really when the gauntlet was sort of thrown down.
As soon as you start to add ride systems in, now you've got production time for ride systems, you got commissioning, you've got installation. It really just doubles and triples the amount of time. Even though the effects and everything that we did on MuppetVision, as Eric said, wasn't cheap and it wasn't necessarily quick, it was quicker than trying to do a ride.
And by the way, all of you who were at the other panel that Tom was talking about earlier, that we were looking at a much bigger Muppets presence at the park. There was a whole Muppets land.
Muppet Studio. It was the Muppet
Studios was the original idea. And we had planned a ride, but we said that's going to have to wait for a few years. What can we do, going back to what I said before, what can we do that be relatively quick and get something out there so our guests have something to enjoy while we get ready to do the bigger idea later on.
So you talked about the bigger idea. Should we just get that out of the way now? Just want to talk about the overall? Paul's already nodding, so I'm going with Paul.
Well, everybody wants to know about it anyway.
You started off this part.
Well, no, so the original idea was Muppet Studios. That was the original concept.
So real quick, we have the overall concept art, Katie. So if you ever look online for MuppetVision concept art, there's obviously the great piece of Inside the Theater with Kermit coming out, but then the other piece you always find is this, and so MuppetVision's there, but there's a whole lot more.
That looks like a Tim Kirk drawing.
I know.
No, that's not Tim. I forget who's. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway.
Anyway, so it was anchored by the Muppet Labs, the 3D film, and the whole concept was it was New York. It was part of New York. So we did several trips to New York and took a bunch of pictures of streets and sidewalks and water towers and buildings and faded graphics, and that was kind of the design vocabulary that we started with. And so that's why part of those buildings that are now kind of what are called Parkside look like New York, but like, why does this look like New York? It makes no sense. Well, it would have made sense if we had done the whole studios. And,
Yeah.
and you can see there's a lot of activation happening here. We did ultimately do the balloon, as you may have seen the model out in the lobby. That is the original model. And then that little red board that says Muppet Studios was a paint sample that we did for the Muppet Balloon. And that we had the Swedish Chef restaurant, which became Pizza Planet, I think, is what happened. The stage one, the studio one, the merchandise store was always the merchandise store. Mama Melrose was Rizzo Rat's Pizzeria, where we had Rizzo Rats and all of his friends had apparently gone through all of Walt Disney World stealing china, stealing dishes.
Acquiring.
Oh, every time a truck
Like
stopped
my
at a-
father.
Every time a truck stopped at a red light. Yeah. And then, like a lot of higher end restaurants have cameras in the kitchen so you can see how your food is prepped. And we had all these ideas about the rats and how they look up at the camera and they're stealing stuff, and it was just their personalities. And then we had above the rafters were these, rat tracks, which is the basically animated rats holding pizza as if they're delivering different parts of the restaurant. There it is.
There it is. Then you could see them up there. And if you went to Mama Melrose, those tracks were there.
Yeah.
They weren't in use, but they were there.
And you can see the TV monitors there. That was showing the kitchen and different commercials that they're promoting themselves. So there was that, the two restaurants, the merchandise space, Muppet Labs, and of course the Great Muppet Movie Ride, which had started design when they were pretty far along in concept, and of course unfortunately Jim passed, and so everything went on hold when Jim passed, obviously.
Could you go back to the first rendering for a second?
The overall?
The overall.
Yeah, the overall with
Also, I just want to
Fozzie
clarify
and
the term Parkside. That's a specifically MGM term, I assume, because the park was split between the back lot and...
So Parkside is between the merchandise space and that little alley behind.
Oh, it's that, okay.
Yeah, we had a different name for it at the time. It was some kind of Muppet referenced street. So now I think we called it Parkside just because it was generic.
Okay.
So two little trivia things about this drawing. One is, when we built the studio, there was a lot of sound stages in the original park, but lots and lots of sound stages. And when we decided this was going to be Muppet Studios, we said, well, you need to have sound stages, obviously, but they can't look like the other beige and red boxes that we had. So we had Richard Graham, who's an architect that worked for us. He was originally from Bechtel. He worked at the original park. He went around Hollywood and looked at different buildings, and he liked the sound stages at Warner Brothers in Burbank because he said they're really unusual. And he said, and I kind of look at them, and you can see the yellow building in the middle has those two sort of vent window things inside. He said they kind of even look like a Muppet, the way they're done. It's almost like the soundstage has eyeballs. And so that's why we landed on that idea. And then the balloon came from the fact that there was a clock tower, which the balloon's actually on the clock tower that's on the other side of this rendering. But anyway, there was a concern that people weren't going to be able to find this because the park was not haphazardly laid out, but haphazardly expanded. And so we sort of, put things where we could figure it out. And this ended up behind Star Tours. And we said, people are going to have a hard time finding where to go here because there wasn't a through pathway. It was kind of a cul-de-sac. So we said we need to put something up high in the air that people will see to say, oh, that's where the Muppets are. So we decided on this big, giant yellow and rainbow-colored balloon with a marquee on the side of it to attract people around the corner. So you could see that from all over the park. That's where that came from.
Yep.
To illustrate that, I know we showed this in the pre-show, Katie, that Construction 1, I think, that 2-minute video, if you can go back to that. Paul sent this to us, and this is, it's interesting because it shows you the lead-in from Star Tours, but also there was a preview sign essentially saying that MuppetVision was coming.
Right.
That's along that path, and you can hear some chatter in the background of someone's upset about the placement of the sign. Construction 1, I think, the 2-minute one? I think
See if we
that's
can,
it.
see if we can.
She's got to pick up the design. If we have to, we'll move it back here. Let's try and see if we can see it. Let's make sure that's the right decision before we find something else. idea is, so you understand why we're crazy here.
About moving it?
Well, it's in the way, looking at Muppet here.
The studio, all the major studios had ornate entrance gates. Paramount Studios, Warner Brothers Studios, they had ornate gates. And of course, with Muppet Studios, we're going to have our own ornate gate. And Michael Frith had designed this beautiful wrought iron gate, like 20, 30 feet wide, 20 feet tall. And it had all the Muppet characters in it. And we had gotten so far along in design that we had gone to metal fabricators, and they were going like, I will do this for free. Just let me do this. And obviously it didn't happen because we didn't do the studio. And again, I don't think any of us want to talk about what wasn't there. I think it's better to talk about what is there.
Right, but
So, but I just want to let you know that Michael Frith did an incredible job designing this thing. And I have somewhere in some storage unit, I have the drawing of it. And if I ever find it, I'll send it to Tom and he'll post it for you. But it's a beautiful piece of art in just as it stands.
And Paul certainly was looking, because several times pages and folios and just piles of, ask Lori, pages of paperwork have arrived at our office to look at. But I know we just said we don't want to talk about what didn't happen, but I loaded some media in.
Okay. Well, we don't have to talk about it. We can watch it.
Could we just,
watch
we'll
it,
just look
yeah.
at a quick look at Great Muppet Movie Ride? Because I know the reason I want to talk about it is, what's funny is, in meeting all of you and getting to talk to Jim Lewis and everyone I've spoken to who's at all involved in this, it feels like one of those things in the career that everyone really wanted to do so badly, whether it was this or the restaurant or whatever anyone was involved in. It's one of those, like, the one that got away.
Right.
And not to linger, obviously what was done was amazing, but there's so few projects I think that everyone involved in keeps coming back. It's like, I really wish we got to do.
Yeah,
Well,
this is.
I think that what's important is, storytelling is important to us, and as we were creating the space for Muppets, it needed to fit in the Disney MGM Studio Tour, so a Muppet Studio, and trying to capture all of those things that would be so special and unique for our Muppets living at the studio and Muppets working and performing at the Muppet Studio. So those are the things the details that we really were working on it. And that's why I think the Muppet Movie Ride was something that would have really pulled the whole studio together.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Jim Lewis. Jim Lewis was the writer with Henson, and the partnership that we had, and we're going to talk a lot more about our partnership, I think, later, the partnership that we had on the 3D film was also here on the Muppet Movie Ride. But I do want to mention that Joe Cicero, Michael Sprout, Marcello, Finelli, and a couple of other people, we get to show their work here. So that's really wanted to make sure that they get their shout outs, because they did an incredible job with this concept.
And that's why I love sharing it, because so many people spend so much time developing this, even though it never made it off the drawing board. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears are visible here. So there you go, the Muppet Movie Ride. You can go to the next one. And we'll just look at a couple of concept art pieces of scenes. I love the homespun. They just rolled down a projector.
And I think that the sort of the conceit of this is that the Muppet Movie Ride was a tour of the Muppet Studios, and the things that could happen when you go through a live filming shoot with the Muppets and the mayhem that might occur in each one of those scenes.
Well, there's also in the spirit of what the Muppets did so great, which is parodies of other things. So it really was a parody of the Great Movie Ride.
Yeah.
If the Muppets were doing their own version of that, what would that be? And what kind of mayhem would ensue? So that's really where it started.
You could just keep rolling through these, Katie. Just take a quick look.
I think, each one of the scenes had this was special about special effects and how special effects may go a little wonky.
Right.
Monsters Unchained. There it is.
Yeah.
Ahead of his time.
Oh, yes.
And Marcelo's credited there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see the design, the concepts here got pretty far along. I mean, we would probably take this level of drawing, start building a model from it, and actually start show set design. So this is pretty developed.
Do we know what the timeline was on this? Like how, if things had gone to plan, what?
No, this is pretty much still in blue sky. I mean,
Okay.
It was in blue sky, yeah.
But we would have gone into making models, and it probably was a 2 to 3 year out
Okay.
yeah.
from Pigs in Space.
The whole crowd had, you have to do it.
Yes. And, and we were trying to put the guest in the middle of each of the scenes. That's the sort of the ride system going through.
Yeah, and I love Stadler and Waldorf in a doom buggy, traveling through the ride ahead of you.
Well, they thought they were going on a VIP tour. Unfortunately, it wasn't.
That's happened to me before.
Yeah.
Is that our last one? Do we have more? That's it, okay. Well, thank you very much. Jim Lewis has been brought up a few times. We did get the chance to go to Jim's home and record a little bit with him. So if we can just start with Jim talking about his MuppetVision role, and since we've already showed the concept art of the facade, Jim had some ideas apparently for the facade of MuppetVision.
When I first came to Muppets, they were working on the Jim Henson Hour, and then the Muppet Disney deal, the original deal, was going through, and this was the first project that was going to happen. And it was when we started on it, we were moving towards doing this whole land. That whole sliver there was going to be a dark ride, and the Great Gonzo's Flying Pizza Restaurant. By the way, I have a restaurant script if Imagineering needs it. I know they built the rafters with the rat waiters, these animatronic rat waiters who were going to deliver food. It was all set to go. I saw not just the drawings, but the prototype. I have the script. It's still as funny as ever. That I was part of the team that was involved really more with the physical space than with the production of the actual 3D. I was not there for that. That was Bill Prady, that was Michael, that was obviously Jim and company, and Jerry, everybody sort of doing that. But if you like the signage and the nomenclature, thank you. So the thing that sticks with me was first coming into that meeting and realizing that if you had an idea, you had this group of magicians who could just bring it to life, and that was amazing. So and then it was, they laid out, here were the ideas, and then how would you expand upon them, and how would Muppets do it differently, and it was a real give and take, and it was getting them to kind of loosen up a little bit. I do remember when the idea for the outside was that the Muppet rats are often seen as the art, and God they were seen as our teamsters. They were the guys who did all the work, the Muppet Rats. So we designed parts of it that would look like a bunch of rats had done it. They did the best job they could, but it looked like a bunch of Muppet Rats had done it. And so they had to keep explaining to facility, the operations, that no, you don't want to clean that up. It's supposed to look like that. So it was that sort of like learning curve to try and make it, it shouldn't look too perfect. It should look like the Muppets did it themselves.
Yeah.
And if the Muppets did it themselves, chances are it was chaos followed by, the Rainbow Connection. It was that sort of, that arc that has always been, which is things fall apart and then they fall together.
So I want to ask, very famously at Disneyland, the Haunted Mansion, Walt said, we'll take care of the outside, the ghosts will take care of the inside. Is there still any thought of that in the late 80s, early 90s? Is that still a Disney concept, or at that point have we understand that we can build environments that are a little run down, a little?
I don't.
It's controlled chaos, a controlled mess. I mean,
Yeah.
it wants to look aged and grained and old, but at the same time, you don't want it to feel like it's not clean.
Yeah.
It is a fine line.
Right.
The one story that that was famously told when I started Imagineering was they cobwebbed the entire inside of the Haunted Mansion to look like it was old, and the custodial crew came in, new ones, and they cleaned it all. They uncobwebbed it.
Well, the same thing happened in the Great Movie Ride. I think I mentioned this in the other panel, but we spent like a whole day gluing wooden cigarette butts down in the gangster scene and wadded up trash and gum wrappers, all this stuff. And the next morning came in and said, "What happened?" And they said, custodial went through and said, "Your construction workers are really messy." So we cleaned up after them. So there's something, ingrained in the Disney, everything must be clean, but I think we do more of a fantasy job of it. So, we don't want to say you want to be like creeped out, but he wants to feel comfortable, like this is the real place, and, I think it's different than what Walt said, but it's everything in measure.
I mean, there's this kind of this uncanny valley. Like, if, for instance, if you took Frontierland, you said, we're in the 1870s. Oh, really? You got people throwing urine out of buildings and, real dirt-rutted streets? No, you don't. So there is this kind of, let's pretend it's the 1870s, So let's pretend it's dirty and messed up, but not really.
Yeah, more of a cinematic version of it.
Okay. So we did, I know, I want to wrap up on Muppet Studio just because Jim had a couple of stories, and I think they're wonderful. So the first one I want to share is, I don't know if I want to spoil the name of this, but Flush Mountain? Oh, Kathy knows. Kathy knows about Flush Mountain. Can we cue up Flush Mountain? Do we have that?
Forgot all about
There's a
that.
projector out. It's the Swedish chef's fault. Oh, Piano Rob did it? Oh, no.
He did fix the sound. And then the projector.
We're having sound problems? Never. There's someone with a chef hat just banging on things.
Well, while you're queuing that up, I was going to say one thing that was really unique about this project, and we're kind of getting at showing Jim and the other partners we have here today with us, is it really was a collaboration. It was one thing, when we did the Great Movie Ride, we of course got legal rights, and we talked to different people, but we didn't have a collaboration with the people from MGM or the people from that did the movie Alien, that kind of thing. But this is really an integration of the Henson people and the Imagineers together, and saying, like, this is what we bring to the table, and this is what we bring to the table.
Yeah.
How can we get together and get the most of best worlds? So it satisfies the Disney audience, but is also true to what the Jim Henson Company has done for many, many years.
What I love about talking to both sides is the Imagineering side goes on and on about the creativity and the humor of the folks from the Henson Company. And then, as you just heard from Jim, calling all of you magicians and you could do anything. I love the admiration from both sides. I think that's part of the magic formula of MuppetVision, for sure.
It is true.
Yeah. Do we have Flush Mountain? Now, continue that magic with a trip to Flush Mountain.
Yeah, that was the idea. I think throughout the project, up until the deal fell apart, the idea was it was going to be this whole area because the Muppets were going to be, you know, this is before I learned the importance of IP. You know, we were going to be this part of the Disney intellectual property team. Because we were like, you know, literally people used to say it was like IBM eating the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
You know, that was that kind of added, you know, it was just like a totally different thing. That said, and the business side I really had nothing to do with. The Imagineering people were like, it was, yeah, I know they're there and they're watching this, so they'll you know, I'm really buttering you up. They just were incredible to work with and never said no. You know, never said, no, we can't do that. They would figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Although I know they said no about the feathers.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's good. You do your research, yeah.
I've talked to Eric and the gang
Yeah.
several times, but yeah, the feathers, I think logistically,
Yeah,
someone had to say
seemed
no.
like a good idea.
Yeah.
They also killed the idea of, and I think if we'd done the bigger area, if we'd done Muppet Studios, Michael and I wanted to do a Muppet World theme park within the Muppet Studios. And it would all be scaled for the rats. So, and it would mostly be done with sound and stuff. The one idea I loved, which I understand why they didn't, was I thought in the restroom, every time you flushed, there would be like Flush Mountain. And they killed it, you know? But the basic idea of a Muppet theme park where where there's a rat version of going through what you're going through as a guest at the park was just something that we're like, yeah, that would be fun. And little ways you could do it, except for the bathroom one. They didn't care for that. But I've always liked it, and I've held on to it, and, you know, who knows? I pull together enough money, I'll buy Disney and do it. Yeah.
Funny.
I still believe in a day we will get a show scene in a bathroom. I want this.
That was one of the things that was one of my favorite things that we didn't get to do. And we did sort of have a show in the restroom, at the entry restroom. Upstairs would have been
Gonzo's Tap Dance Studio.
So as you were using the facilities, you could hear the girls dancing and Gonzo, you know.
Tap dancing.
Okay, girls, and the piano playing, and it would have, yes, Jim, we did write, we had the whole script, and I do miss that. There are speakers in those restrooms, if you ever wonder why they were there. And, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the whole building out, which is now called Parkside. All of those facades had a function in the Muppet Studios with costuming and makeup and camera department and all that. And one of the areas above was the dance rehearsal hall. And so we said, oh, it's above the restroom. Ah, here's an idea. You can hear the dancers come when you're in the bathroom.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll bring us a background on MuppetVision. So again, they were larger idea, but what is the thing we can deliver? MGM has the most fascinating opening years and development. There's no other park in my lifetime, at least, where it opened and immediately everyone's like, oh, we need everything now. We need to throw all your ideas at the wall and let's see what happens. I think in that first 5 years, you have more blue sky concepts than, at least to my knowledge, any other park had that quickly.
I have a photo. It's actually a photo. The close-up is on Eric and I. And behind us, and I should have brought it, is we used to pin ideas up on boards, right? Our blue sky meetings, we pin up ideas. Behind us is all these ideas that eventually, I think most of them made it into the studios. This picture was probably taken before the studios were opened, possibly. One of the ideas is Hollywood Hotel, which became, guess what? Tower of Terror, right? And so there's all these other ideas, and I mean, I started working on Star Tours before the park was open. We started building Star Tours before the park was open. Because we just, I mean, credit Michael and Frank at the time. It was like, we could tell already it's too small. The interest in this park is too great. And so what are we gonna do for capacity? You know, parade, nighttime show, whatever. And so we started designing, again, Star Tours happened because we know the ride system, the films are done. Yeah. Okay, we have to do a new queue line because it's Florida. We want to add 6 simulators instead of 4, which is what Disneyland had because of capacity. And so it was kind of like, not fast and easy, but faster and easier to get that in. And plus, I mean, the Star Tours was a hit in Disneyland, right? So that was also a no-brainer. We didn't have to test it or worry whether it was going to be popular. We already knew. So that was kind of the start of go faster, must go faster. We're in Jurassic Park, we're in the Jeep, must go faster, must go faster.
The other thing is Michael Eisner was so intuitive and so creative in his way. He was really like, I like that, let's do it. And there was, oh, sorry. And he didn't fire a gun. So let's go do that. And there was very little pushback. You know, said if Michael says yes, let's go do it. So we were able to get things done without, tons and tons of analyzation, thinking, focus groups, and all that kind of stuff. And some things stuck and really well, and some things were okay. And but it was, let's just try it, because if we don't try it, we're never going to know. And that whole era of just doing whatever we could to move forward.
And I think that was one of the things to our benefit as Imagineering, because we are all very creative, and usually there's still a schedule and a budget involved, and that's where part of my job was. But what was really kind of nice is because this was our first effort with Jim Henson, and able to say, do we have to go to Jeffrey Katzenberg with this? And so being able to really execute the 4D effects and building this theater to the best it can be, that is the best 3D theater you will ever probably be in. It was designed specifically for this show, and with the acoustics and lighting, everything was very detailed out. So for us, it was really kind of fun because we didn't, as a show producer, I wasn't running into a lot of issues with having to really fight for some of the really great ideas.
Big fan of the Muppets.
Yes.
He was very on board with this. And so the relationship begins. What are the early meetings? Who's at the early meetings?
The first Blue Sky meetings, it's, again, this was a long time ago, and we've done a lot of projects since then. It was really fast track, but I do remember having a meeting in one of the conference rooms in Glendale at Imagineering that Jim was at, and Tom Fitzgerald was there. There were probably 10 or 15 people, and we had really not met really the Henson people, so I'm sure some of them were there, but we started out just like Paul was talking about before, a blank wall and 1,000 index cards, and said, what have we already done? What haven't we tried? What can we do? What would be easy? What would be hard? What would make this different? And we just started putting categories of gags and film moments and storyline up on the wall. And so, and some of them, everybody said, yes, that's it. We got to have a banana cream pie that goes in the audience and hits, Fozzie in the face, that kind of thing. Or maybe it wasn't that detailed at that point, but, things float in the audience. How can we stretch the limits of 3D, keep it true to the Muppets, and make our audience have a wow moment too? Yeah. So it was really, that was really how it really started. And
What's crazy is from those meetings become so many things that become the standard of theme park, themed entertainment shows, not even just 3D shows, but theater shows.
Yeah.
The in-theater effects and
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
Right. And I remember in particular, somebody said bubbles. Can we do bubbles? And we said, well, custodial will hate us, but we can do bubbles. Or the audience that has their soap all over their clothes when they go home will hate us. But no, so those kinds of things came out there. So we've done lasers, we've done wind, and we can still do those, but we have to, top ourselves. And one thing, I think I mentioned this to you before, Tom, one thing that Jim really wanted to do is have an exploding chicken in the a chicken.
This
that
is what we
came out,
alluded to when
and
Jim
I don't
mentioned
remember how it was
feathers.
going to explode. It wasn't going to be, but like a cartoon blow up.
I think it came out of the cannon.
Yeah,
I think it was supposed
and
to.
the chicken had no feathers left, and he wanted feathers to rain down on the audience. So he threw this idea out, and And we said, well, that's, okay, bubbles is one thing. Feathers, if we're doing this show every 15 or 20 minutes or whatever it was, I'm not sure we can clean the feathers up fast enough. But interestingly enough, we never let that idea go. And when we did the Enchanted Tiki Room under new management, one thing we brought back was the feather idea. And we did, if you guys remember that show, there was one point where Iago gets blown up, and one single feather floats down from the ceiling of the audience, which the operations people had to load at every single show.
You had to go see that show very early in its life to get that feather.
I remember when we were talking about that idea, they said, oh, but because they said, no, if there's one feather, somebody's gonna like climb over all the seats to get that one feather. If there's 8,000 chicken feathers, we have a problem, but one feather we could deal with, and so we did it. So no good ideas ever die. That's the point.
A little side note about those meetings is that they took place in the building we call the bowling alley, which, when you think about Imagineering being one of the most creative companies in the world, we had real trouble naming our buildings where we worked. They were all named after the street they were on, right?
Yeah.
Oh, where do you work today? I'm in Grand Central. Oh, I'm in Rodier. Oh, I'm over on Flower Street. Oh, we already had a Snorri building, so the other building on Snorri became the bowling alley because it was a bowling alley. And that
In a former life.
in a former life, it was all cleaned out except for like 4 or 6 lanes.
I was going to say, when you guys were there were still a few lanes.
There's a few lanes left,
They
yeah.
didn't keep them.
Yeah.
And if you watch Pulp Fiction, the bar that they go to, the Jackrabbit or something, that's our building. That's the exterior of the bowling alley. So anyway, with Jim and the Henson creative staff that we worked with, it was just so collaborative. And I want to tell one story about Jim is that if you had an idea that, I want to say bad idea, but an idea that wasn't really ready for prime time, he would never say, oh, it's not, no, let's, he would just go, So you knew after a while, you go like, oh, I don't think he likes that idea.
But he would always say, that's interesting, but I would like to go in this direction.
Yeah, but he would never shoot down an idea, which is a great lesson for anybody who wants to get into this industry. There's no bad ideas, just some ideas that aren't ready for prime time. But that's what he would do. He would go, what about what we talked about yesterday? Yeah, and I think there's, besides the chicken, the only thing that I think, because I know this question will come up, is there anything that Jim suggested or Jim Lewis or Bill Prady suggested, and I don't know if you've met Bill Prady yet, but Bill was the writer for the show, the film, he wanted a cannonball. The penguins come up and shoot a cannonball, and that's what blows up the Swedish Chef's projection room, which is it's all implied in audio and with lighting, but I think Jim really wanted a cannonball. And we had given enough time and enough budget. Yeah, of course we could have figured that out, but we were kind of up against it with other things, and we just said, okay, we'll put that on the list. So that was our way of saying, So we didn't deliver that, but I think
It sounds like a lot of the list happened, though. I mean, there's so many effects. There's arrows that pop out of the wall, and
yeah. I don't know if you're going to have a separate panel about interior theater effects, or if we want to talk. So we'll just hold some of that.
We'll hold off on that. But just these what other takeaways from these early meetings? And then we can introduce Bill Prady at that point, but because Bill said he started working from there were the meetings and all these ideas thrown up on a board, and then storyboards happened, and then Bill wrote from the storyboards. Right.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. No, you think about what came first, the chicken or the egg. Did we come up with gags first, and then Bill had to write around that, or did Bill and Jim say, what we really should do is just do a demonstration of 3D, and then that's the excuse for all these gags.
Right.
So I don't remember which came first. Or maybe it organically just happened that way.
And I think it's also important to remember that we had done Magic Journeys, and we had lessons learned about 3D. And then we had Captain EO, and again, lessons learned about how do you exploit 3D in the theater. So when we did MuppetVision, there was a lot of discussion with Jim and their team about what makes 3D successful, and what do you avoid. Items, how you film things. So Jim was a really good learner, And I think the team worked really hard to make it the best 3D that we've done.
Well, you guys were leading the industry, because I know we live in the age of, we've lived through the Dolby 3D, people have seen Avatar in theaters and that 3D. But at this time, there wasn't, I know Jim mentioned in some interviews that he had talked about doing 3D before, but I think he was never really enamored with what was out there for theaters. But what you had all done with Magic Journeys and Captain EO had set the standard for what 3D could be.
Well, we were not, it wasn't a bus and truck kind of company
Yeah.
thing where we had to go to every, theater around the
Yeah.
country. It was going to only be there, so we could, specifically design
Yeah.
all the angles, all the effects, everything. And I think it really was, so I remember when you were talking, Paul, we said, you know what, if we just make it about making a 3D movie, we can do any gag we want, and we'll figure out a reason why that gag's in. There's like the banana cream pie, it's if we do a story.
It's a variety
it
show
just
and
happens
a
to be in
test,
3D.
yeah.
And we're at the studio, and it's about creating movie magic. So let's make the whole story about, the Muppets creating this kind of magic that they want to present to you. So, yeah, it really was that kind of way.
So, through the collaboration, the chicken or the egg, we don't know. The gags are there, but there's also story ideas. And so let's introduce Bill Prady. For those, you maybe have heard of a little show called The Big Bang Theory. Bill's the co-creator of that, but in a previous life, Bill really got his career going.
We're all little babies.
Bill really got his career going.
Where did we go wrong?
Please stay with Disney.
Bill didn't have catered breakfast today. Anyway,
And today,
We win.
and Bill wanted to be here today, but today's his birthday, so.
Disney gave him a great birthday gift this
And
weekend.
his wife had a massive party planned for him. It's a
Yeah.
significant milestone birthday. So he said, my wife will kill me if I go to Florida, so I can't be there, but
I will say-
I'll do something for you.
When we did the interview, I was privy to some of the party planning, and it was the most mind-boggling, the most LA experience imaginable. It was mind-boggling, the conversations that were happening.
Okay.
I know Bill really wanted to be here, but let's, I want to set up Bill getting hired by the Jim Henson Company. We have that up first, Bill getting hired.
The story of how I came to work with Jim Henson. So I had, when I was 19 years old, my girlfriend and I ran away to New York. I dropped out of college, and I was working as a computer programmer, which I came to not like. I was a self-taught computer programmer. This was in the early days of what we came.
Look at that.
The story of how I came to work with Jim Henson. So I had, when I was 19 years old, my girlfriend and I ran away to New York. I dropped out of college, and I was working as a computer programmer, which I came to not like. I was a self-taught computer programmer. This was in the early days of what we came to call PCs. And I wound up through the woman who had produced a show that my soon-to-be ex-girlfriend was in, which was 321 Contact for Children's Television Workshop. Through her, I left the computer business, and I wound up working as a production assistant on a show that she was producing for Nickelodeon. And when I got there, I said, oh, I think I like show business. And I was encouraged by a wonderful writer on that project, a guy named Terry Taylor. He said, I really think you ought to try writing. And Terry let me co-write some episodes of You Can't Do That on Television with him for Nickelodeon. And then I started looking for jobs in TV. And so I took production assistant jobs, and I took a production assistant job on a show about computers, which was great because I had the two skills. And when that ended, somebody recommended me for a project that Jim Henson was doing. He was going to do a project called Muppet Institute of Technology, and this was, I think it was supposed to be like a series of specials where the Muppet characters would look at the exciting world of technology in the 1980s. Jim was fascinated with the developments that were happening in computers and computers in the arts and all of that, and he wanted to do a series about it. So I showed up for work, and the writers on the project were Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Norm Stiles from Sesame Street, and a bunch of other absolutely amazing people. But what I didn't know when I got there was that the project hadn't sold anywhere, and it was one of those rare cases where Jim was having trouble selling a project and ultimately nobody wanted it, and the thing fell apart. But I had gotten to the Muppets, and I wanted to stay there. So I looked for any job in the company at all, and I took a job in the licensing department. The licensing department is the part of a company that handles the license to toys and products and clothing and stuff. But in doing that, I found some writing opportunities. So, there would be, a box copy on a Muppet doll that was Muppety, and I started writing that. And I poked around and found little writing opportunities, and was able to successfully transition from working in the licensing department to kind of being a jack of all trades writer at the Muppets. The Muppet Show was out of production for years at this point, and so the day-to-day writing tasks, and they're often very miscellaneous things, they weren't getting done. There was no one there doing them. So I sort of found that as a niche, and that led to a whole bunch of really fun, odd, miscellaneous projects. There was a Dial-A-Muppet phone service that I wrote sketches for. Like if Kermit couldn't attend something and was going to send a video of him instead, I would write that, and then I worked on the short-lived Jim Henson Hour, and at that point I had just become sort of the in-house writer, so that led to working on MuppetVision.
We mentioned technology. There's a great parallel with Walt Disney, two incredible entertainers and visionaries who are fascinated with current technology. And we'll talk about that. I know in the next presentation we talk about Waldo a lot. I assume that was laid out from the earliest meetings, that they wanted a computer-generated character.
Yeah, that's something that was being worked on. They said we should feature this, and Bean Bunny was also a relatively new character at that point too.
Yeah.
So we wanted to feature those two.
Absolutely. So Bill also has some stories from some of the meetings with you all at Walt Disney Imagineering. This is the haggling story.
My favorite memory, I think the story that I tell all the time, is we would sit in meetings with Imagineering and talk about, a lot of meetings about the in-theater effects. And during the meeting, they would price things out because they were, they had a budget and that they were trying to stay within. And so, something would come up, and Jim would say, well, the drummer in the orchestra, could his hi-hat work? Could the cymbal open and close? And the Imagineers would think about this, and they would come back and say, we think we can do that, and then they would put a number to it, because we had basically a spreadsheet of where we were spending the money, and they'd come back and say, we can do that, and we think it'll be, I don't know, let's say a number like, it'd be $20,000 to have that part of the drum kit be animated. And Jim would always say, well, all right, Bill and I will do it for $750. and it was just this strange running joke that he had. I also like we were often subversive in the thing. we were starting to do things with Disney, and I am a huge Disney fan. I am a big theme park, Disney theme park fan. In fact, by the time you see this, my son will have graduated high school, and what my son and daughter want to do the next day to celebrate is a day at Disneyland. But there's a quality sometimes to Disney things that you notice, and one that always struck me was Epcot. Just the arrangement of the nation pavilions with the prominent American pavilion in the center. And so I started referring to Epcot. My description of Epcot was that it was a salute to all nations, but mostly America. and so when Sam Eagle explains, what his big final production number is, I thought, well, Sam, with his fairly jingoistic approach, would certainly call it the same thing. So that was the origin of that. And also, if you listen very carefully, I cannot state for certain that these small world characters technically survive when the scenery falls on them. That's, there will be different interpretations of this over time. I have my own belief about what happens to them. But that kind of, that sort of Muppet subversive nature, a little bit of the biting the hand that's feeding it at the time, made me very happy. I'll tell you this, I love the 3D movie. I loved the pre-show almost as much. The pre-show was a glorious writing experience because they showed us the layout of how they wanted to do it, and they showed how the monitors were set up. And the realization was that the monitors, the way they had done it was they sort of were in groups of 3. And I remember, I apologize to everyone because I remember all good ideas as being mine, and I don't know if that's a fact. But I do think I remember pointing out that everyone would be able to see 3 monitors. And what if we started with the lie that the monitors are showing the same thing, and then we break the lie? And so I'm trying to remember the sequence, but I think you break the lie when Gonzo is dancing. And so you have Gonzo dancing with a flower pot on his head, and then one of the Gonzos loses the flower pot, and another Gonzo leaves his monitor, comes into that one, helps him back on, and then in just one of the most beautiful pieces of puppeteering, helps him get back on beat for the dance with 5, 6, 7, go. And then once that Gonzo sees the other Gonzo's got it, he goes back into his monitor, and I loved that. And then from that point, now that you've broken the illusion, now stuff moves back and forth, and then they're all crazy. I love Rizzo coming out as in a rat costume and saying "Welcome to my park." I think it's the subversive stuff that makes me smile the most when I think about it.
We talked about ideas thrown for the main show, but how early on did we know there was going to be a pre-show experience and any of those ideas came into being?
Oh, I think we knew early on it was going to be a pre-show. I think it was one of those things that came late because we had this pause in the development, and then after the pause was done, and then we said, oh, we have to do this pre-show very quickly. So I remember, Bill remembers it a little differently than I do. I remember them saying that they would like to have a set of 3 monitors for each zone. Otherwise, I don't think we would have spaced it the way we did, as I'm recalling. So I think Bill probably had in his mind using 3, and we said, okay, we'll put a 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, 3 here. But there was always going to be a pre-show, because we knew, you know, with that kind of turnaround, you have to entertain guests, and you have to set them up for what. In the theme park world, we say, tell the guests what they're going to see, show it to them, and then tell them what they just saw. Right, so that's kind of what we did. So you get in the pre-show, you're going to see a demonstration of 3D technology.
Yep.
Then you see the demonstration, and we said, see, now we showed it, we're done. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the conceit.
But there wasn't a lot of this done to this point. The other 3D shows, Captain EO had a short little montage of the creation of the film. I know Magic Journeys, when it was at Magic Kingdom, I think they showed a 3D Disney short with Chip and Dale, I believe.
In Epcot, it was basically a Kodak commercial.
Yeah, and then when they moved it, they just threw a cartoon in front of it. But you were all, we'll do a full show before the show.
I think another part of that was just meeting the needs of operations and making sure that the guests were in a air-conditioned space and they were covered from the rain. We were in Florida, so I think from a capacity standpoint, I think one of our requirements would have been.
Yeah, instead of an operator telling you how to put your glasses on, like we had the Muppets.
Yeah.
You know, the Muppets need, this is, by the way, this is their laboratory. Why would we have a human come in and tell you how to wear your glasses? Some Muppets.
Right, it was not the video, but it was another chance to do a lot of sight gags that we talked about doing in the movie, but probably would be either too fast or too subtle. So we really had a great time with the Henson people, kind of with a net full of Jell-O is one of the most famous ones, and you know, all the different crates and the labeling and stuff like that. It was really fun, so people could explore it as well as get the instructional video.
And also acquiring all the multiple of those props. You'll see there's movie props. We had an opportunity to go to the Jim Henson warehouse in New York, and they said, yeah, anything you want in here, you guys can have. So it was, a lot of that stuff is from the Muppet Studio.
And as I remember, that pre-show came together pretty quickly. I mean, we were really, the rest of the show was moving along. We said, oh my gosh, we're gonna open, we gotta do this pre-show pretty fast. And we were just like Kathy said, just trying to find stuff anywhere to put in that building. I do remember one day I was down here for a long, extended period of time working at that show, and we said we need more stuff for the ceiling, and we said, well, how would we have all the Muppets costumes that they're gonna, you know, the backstage costuming department. So I went to Marshall's and basically bought out the children's department and brought that back, and we got 1,000 hangers and hung all those clothes from the ceiling and labeled them Miss Piggy and so on and so forth. And they were far enough away, they looked like they'd fit the Muppets. But it was that kind of like, you know, what can we do quickly to get this thing done? But it'll still, you know, feel right. It wasn't cheap, but it feel right.
Although Miss Piggy would never shop at Marshall's.
Marshall's.
Not a knock on Marshall.
You just wouldn't tell her.
We cut all the Marshall's tags removed.
No, we,
And they were in the dark anyway.
anytime you go to a theme park and you see crates and barrels, that means they ran out of money, but they still have theming to do. Like every land will have crates and barrels, right? And so if you think about the pre-show in Muppets, we had wardrobes, dresser drawers. We also had crates that said, send to Muppets. They even say, send to Muppet Studios, where you go like, where's Muppet Studios at? You know, we never changed the graphics. So there's a lot of crates that have Gonzo's special effects, exploding, whatever, send to Muppet Studios. So there's a lot of crates in there. And then, as Kathy mentioned, we did go through the warehouse in New York. They opened it up for us and said, well, whatever you want. And we had a bunch of original stuff sent down. Some stuff we didn't get, so we recreated it. The Pigs in Space spaceship we remade ourselves at our Tahunga facility, going back to stupid names for buildings. It was on Tahunga Building, Tahunga Street. So that was our big fabrication shop. They made a bunch of stuff for us. And then our graphics people, Jim Lewis came up with a lot of nomenclature, and Jim Boxstall created a lot of the, Disney graphics designer created a lot of the graphics with Michael Frith. And so we just came in with a bunch of artists, like, you know, Miss Piggy's wardrobe, this is this, and this, you know, and Electric Mayhem stuff, and we just did a lot of crates and barrels.
You had, was it you that had the story about the materials used for the net full of Jell-O?
Yeah, so if you know that it's a famous gag in the pre-show. I'm sure you've all heard it. It was a net full of Jell-O, and so we had the net. It was a fishing net, and the Jell-O is actually they would create when they made the animated figure heads, like the pirate heads. They would use this material, this plastic material that was, you know, when the pirates talked or when the animated characters talk, it was pliable. Well, they had all this excess stuff, this excess material, and they just melted it down in blocks. And that is what the Jell-O is. It's all these old pirate heads and animated figure heads melted down into blocks of
It's actually a net full of pirate remains.
yeah. Yeah. So that all came from our Mapo division up back in Glendale. We were looking for some kind of thing that looked like Jell-O, and we were just going through the Mapo building and said, make that. And they did.
We're going to throw it over to some of our friends from the Henson side in a moment. But in order to bridge that gap, from the writing side, Bill has one more little anecdote of writing on MuppetVision to share with us.
I think it all happened at once. The writing, the idea of the gags, the everything. It was a simultaneous thing. There were a lot of people contributing. Jim Lewis, Michael Frith, obviously, Jim, and we would have. We would sit down and we'd have sessions, we sort of knock stuff out. Jim would often write out the ideas as storyboards. And then I would take those storyboards and that we had come up with collaboratively, and then I would script off the storyboard. So I would fill in the dialogue that would let us move from scene to scene and the dialogue within the scenes. It was a very, very collaborative effect. And also, at the same time, we were meeting with Imagineering to talk about what could be done in the theater. So those were a series of meetings about things like the Penguin Orchestra, Statler and Waldorf, the Swedish Chef, and the real radical thing in this is Sweetums. And this is an odd and bold idea, which is the notion that part of this experience is going to require that an actor come out for every screening of this in a Sweetums costume and lip sync to the track. And I remember a lot of discussions about that as to whether or not that was practical. And but Imagineering pointed out that characters doing things on a regular basis is an established part of the theme park experience. So we went ahead with that.
Do you remember that coming up in those early meetings?
Oh,
the
yeah.
idea?
I was going to say it, I forgot it, but that's one of the things that we said, what if a live character or somebody breaks the wall and comes into the theater? That was one of the first things up on the wall.
Yeah, that was one of those things where you said, what has never been done in a 3D movie before?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, have a live character come out and interact.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you, obviously everybody has watched the film, if you watch Kermit and Fozzie, they're interacting with Sweetums. I mean, they are all, everybody on the screen is breaking that plane, that fourth dimension, and into the audience. And so it's really quite good.
Remember, I was thinking back that in that case, here's something we never did, but in the late 70s, Diana Ross did a tour where she was projected on screen on a big staircase, and it was all in white, and she came down the staircase singing the beginning of Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and then the screen was actually all strips of fabric, and at the very last second, she burst through the screen, and there she was on the stage. And we talked about doing something like that, by having Sweetums or one of the characters come out of the screen, so that the 3D really comes 4D, which was not practical to do she did it, once or twice a night, and everybody can repair it in between, so it was very fragile. But, so we couldn't do everything, but the idea of having a character come to the theater was born out of that original idea.
And by the way, how these ideas never go away, we did a little show in Paris called Cinemagique,
Right.
where the character comes out of the screen, and he goes back into the screen.
Yep.
very cool. Oh, thank you. Well, we're going to talk to all of you again
Yep.
real soon.
Yay.
Thank you. This is cool. We're going to take a very short intermission, and then we're going to find out how the film portions came into being.